Swiftaroos, it's Prof. G, and in this lesson we're going to get a little loopy by learning about while loops and repeat while loops in Swift. And we'll use this to avoid any repeated phrases and images in our app so you're always greeted with some fresh inspiration. Let's put big learning on repeat. Giddy up! Well, Swifters, after our randomization lesson, our app is looking better, but I noticed that the text holding our message jumps around based on the size of our image. See where it is here? But when the size of the image changes, like for this image that isn't so tall, the text moves up. So that's not necessarily the look we want. One way we can easily change this is simply to put the text field with its fixed size message frame at the top. So I'll highlight and cut out the text view, and I can remove this extra spacer. We don't need two spacers in a row. And I can paste the text view up top. That one spacer will still push the buttons to the bottom. Try this out, and it looks fantastic. But another thing you might notice is that sometimes we get repeated images and phrases. So I'm putting the voice over the video after we've run it, so I know what's going to show up next, but I've paused here and the text says, "Fabulous, that's you with the penguin buddies." Now watch what happens when I click show message again. The message is new, "You are awesome," but the random image repeated, I see the penguin buddies again, twice in a row. You should see similar repeats if you click the button enough times, and if we're really looking for random inspiration, we might want to make sure that the phrase or image that we're looking at isn't repeated the next time we press that button. So let's fix this, and to do so, we'll make friends with the while loop and the repeat while loop. And to try out these guys, let's open up a new playground, and since we're going to be learning about while and repeat loops, let's name the playground While and Repeat Loops. I'll get rid of the greeting, and imagine this scenario. We have a 4-sided dice, and we don't want to repeat our dice roll. Now, sometimes when you program, it might help to write the logic out in English first before converting it to Swift. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll put it all in comments. So first, we have a 4-sided dice. We don't want to repeat our last roll, so we'll need to keep track of the last roll, roll again, compare the last roll with the current roll. If the last roll equals the current roll, then we need to roll again, and we need to repeat that, keep rolling until the current roll doesn't equal the last roll. Now we've almost got this if we use an if statement. Let's try this out. Why don't we call our last roll last dice roll and our new roll new dice roll? So we can say var last dice roll equals 4. For purposes of working in the playground, I'll just assume the last roll was 4. And we'll say var new dice roll equals int.random in the range 1 4. Then we want to check to see if the new dice roll equals the last dice roll. And if it's true, then we want to roll the dice again with our new dice roll equals int random. So we can say if last dice roll equals new dice roll. If that's true, then we've got a repeated value. So in between brackets, we want to get another value for new dice roll. And we can just use this bit of code that we used when we initialized our new dice roll value. So I'll just copy this and paste it down below. New dice roll equals int.random 1 through 4. Then I'll print out my new dice roll, and this is going to work fine as long as you don't roll a 4 twice in a row. That's actually a circumstance that should occur about 1 every 16 rolls. So I restarted my playground a bunch of times, and sure enough, eventually I ended up printing out a 4. How come? Well, this is what happens. When we ran this code, we rolled a 4 and put it in new dice roll. That made the if condition true. Last dice roll, which we assumed was a 4, equals new dice roll, also a 4. So we execute what's in between the curlies. But when we generated a random number a second time and set that to new dice roll, we got a 4 again in this circumstance. So we ended up printing out 4, which was allegedly the last value that we rolled. So this code would fail about 1 in every 16 times if we try not to repeat the last roll. What we really need to do is we need to go back up here each time we roll in the curlies and check again to see if new dice roll is equal to the last dice roll. And we need to keep doing this over and over again until we get a new dice roll that isn't a 4. That means we finally failed this condition. And if we were sure we didn't have a 4, then when we printed out a value, we'd never get a 4. And we can get this repeating over and over again until this condition is no longer true by using the while loop. Now the while loop looks pretty familiar. It looks like an if statement without an else or an else-if clause. We just have the while keyword instead of the if keyword. And like an if statement, we check a condition that returns a Boolean value, either true or false. And if it's true, we execute what's inside the curlies. But here's where things are different. In a while loop, after we execute what's in the curlies, we go back up to the while part and we check the Boolean condition again. So we loop back up to the top, hence the name loop. And if it's still true, then we repeat what's in the curlies again. And we do that over and over again, looping back through the stuff in the curlies until the condition is false. Once it's false, we fall down below the curlies and continue with our code. And if, when we first encounter a while loop, the condition fails in the first pass, we never execute what's inside the curlies. So let's try this out. It's an easy change. Just change if to while, and now if you run this code, the code will work, and you will never get a 4 no matter how many times you re-execute this code. And so now that you've seen this, let's see if you can put a while loop to work by completing this next challenge. This is a dice roll challenge. We want to see how many dice rolls it takes to roll a 6 using a 6-sided die. And so it's easy for us to compare answers. Why don't you write your code to keep track of the current dice roll value using a variable named dice roll, lower camel case, and keep track of the number of rolls in a value named roll count, lower camel case, and the program should print the result of each dice roll like this. Dice roll number, roll count equals dice roll. And once a 6 is rolled, your program should print it took roll count rolls to roll a 6. And this little box in the lower right is an example of what the output might look like when your code runs. I know you can do it. Pause. Give it a shot. Try your best. And when you're ready, resume, and let's compare answers. First, I'll comment out the prior code so that we can focus on this solution. And again, if it helps, you can walk through what you want to do in English. So in comments, I'll say, roll the dice and save it in dice roll. Start roll count at 1. Print dice roll, number sign roll count equals dice roll. Then check if dice roll equals 6. If not, roll the dice again. Add 1 to roll count. Print dice roll, number sign roll count equals dice roll. And repeat the check. And then when we've rolled a 6, we want to print it took roll count rolls to roll a 6. Now this technique is helpful for some, so I want to show it in this video. If it's not helpful for you, then you can just go ahead and skip it. But if you take a look back at the English code, then you can think, all right, well, where do I need to put in my Swift code? And this line up here that says check if dice roll equals 6, oh yeah, that's where my while loop code should be. And then the closing curly should be down here in repeat the check, because each time we go through what's in between the curly, we want to repeat our while loop check. Now to roll the dice again, oh yeah, that's where we use int.random. And of course, we're going to use int.random when we roll the dice for the first time. And if you didn't get the answer on your own, you might want to pause here and try one more time. But here's what the code will look like in Swift. First, we set up our dice roll with our first dice roll as var dice roll equals int.random in 1.6. And we also set up our roll count with var roll count, setting that equal to 1 because we just rolled our dice once. And then we're going to print out dice roll number sign string interp equals string interp. In the first string interp, that's going to be roll count. In the second string interp, that's going to be dice roll. So now we want to check and see if the dice roll is not equal to 6. So we'll say while dice roll exclamation equals 6, open and close curlies. Remember in Swift, not equals is exclamation point equal sign, no space between them. Well, if we haven't reached 6, then we're going to roll the dice again, and we can just copy the code that we have up here that we used when we initialized dice roll. Now make sure you don't copy var because we've already declared the variable, so dice count already exists. Since we roll the dice, we want to increment roll count by 1, so I'll just copy roll count equals 1, but I'll put a plus in front of it. Remember our notation plus equals, that's the same as roll count equals roll count plus 1. And then each time we roll a dice and increment the count, we want to print out the same statement we printed out after we did this the first time. So I'm going to copy that, paste it down below in between the curlies. Now what's the test condition? Dice roll doesn't equal 6. So when dice roll does equal 6, then we fall down below the curlies, and what we want to do is print out here, print, it took string interp rolls to roll a 6, and in between the string interp, we put roll count. All right, let's give this a shot. I can shift return. Cool. For me, it took 3 rolls. I'm going to give myself more space in the console, and you can try this out a few more times, but it's looking great. Now another critically important thing to keep in mind, be 100% sure that you've got a terminating condition. That means with a while loop, make sure the code in the curlies eventually produce a condition where the while loop is false. If not, you'll have what's called an infinite loop, and your code will run forever and ever between the curlies. So if the while condition is never going to be false, your program's going to hang and eventually crash. So let's mimic the infinite loop just so you can see what's happening. And by the way, if your code looks like it isn't working and it might be the while loop, you can put a print statement inside of it and check to see the results like we've done here. Now, in order to demonstrate an infinite loop, I'm going to create a condition that will never be false. So the curlies will continue to execute over and over again. I'm going to say while dice roll does not equal 7, and that's constantly going to be true because we're only looking for random numbers from 1 to 6. We're never going to hit 7. So watch what happens when I press play, and I'm going to be prepared to press stop really quickly because the loop's going to keep going and going. And dang! So I pressed stop pretty quickly, but you can see I rolled 17,091 times in between play and stop. Yikes! And you can continue to try this again. Make sure you press stop though. One other way you can stop things is by clicking in the console and pressing Control-C. That should also stop your code. I'm going to head up here and correct my infinite loop code and change 7 back to 6. But this sometimes happens. It looks like the infinite loop is causing Xcode to hang. You see the little beach ball here? And so teachable moment, here's a pro tip for you. If you need to force crash an application that's hanging, you can Command Tab over to the Finder, then under the Apple menu, select Force Quit. Then you'll see a list of all of your running applications. You can click on the one that you want to force quit and press Force Quit. But if you truly have a problem, the app that's hanging should show up in red. It's not red here, and oh, it looks behind the scenes like the beach ball has stopped swirling. I think the Control-C finally took right after Xcode processed a stop press. So now you've seen an infinite loop, you know what that's all about. And by the way, fun fact, Apple's world headquarters before Apple Park was at a location they named One Infinite Loop. That was the company's actual address. I've been there many times with my students. It's still there today, it's just not the primary headquarters, and there is a loop road out front surrounded by Apple buildings. Now, if we take a look at the logic here, we have some code that seems to be repeated. We roll the dice, we set the count, we print, then we check the while condition, and inside the loop, we roll the dice, we update the count, and we print. It would be cool if we could roll and print before checking the while statement. This way we wouldn't have to have the redundant print statement up top. Well, we can. Let me introduce you to the repeat while statement. Repeat while is also a loop. With repeat while, we start with a repeat statement, but we don't check the Boolean condition until after the curlies. We have a while statement after the last curly. That's where the true-false condition is. Now, this loop repeats as long as the Boolean condition is true, just like a while loop, but the difference here is that you always execute the curlies at least once. In a while loop, since the test condition comes before the curlies, if the test condition isn't true in the first pass, you'd never execute what's inside the curlies. So if you want to execute the curlies at least once, use a repeat loop, although really everything you can do with a repeat loop, you can also do with a while loop, you just might have a small amount of duplicate code. So let's rewrite the code we just used, but with a repeat while loop. Shockingly easy, I can just cut out the while statement, replace it with the repeat keyword, then after the last curly, paste in the while statement, and I'm done. But now we can also get rid of this redundancy up here. We don't need to print before the loop because we print inside the loop, but we have to make sure that we initialize roll count to 0 since we aren't rolling a value to check against the test condition until we're inside the loop. And then you can stop and start, and this works great. Plus, one less line of code. But there is one more very minor efficiency tweak that we can make. Notice when we declare our dice roll variable, we're also initializing it with a random value, but we never use this value because we generate another random value each time we're inside the repeat loop. Well, it is possible to declare a variable without initializing it. All we need to do is add a colon and then the type of this variable. Then we can eliminate the equal sign. There's one important thing to remember if you declare but don't initialize the variable, though. You have to be 100% certain that the first time you use that uninitialized variable in your code, you then initialize it, meaning you take that declared variable with nothing inside it and you put something inside it. What you don't want to do is something like check the value inside a declared variable that doesn't have anything inside it. If you do that, you're going to get an error. Why don't you follow along with the code change I'm about to make, and you'll see what I mean. When we declare dice roll with var dice roll, delete everything after the word dice roll, then put in a colon, and we're going to explicitly declare this as an int with capital INT. So we've created the variable dice roll, it's declared, but we haven't initialized it, we haven't put anything in the box that is the dice roll variable. Now remember I said the first time you have a variable that's declared but not initialized, you have to assign something to it. And that's exactly what we do. Look at our code. The first time we mention dice roll after we declare it, we're assigning a new random value to it. Cool, our bases are covered. This code's going to work. Let's try it out. Nice. And now let me show you that declaring dice roll without initializing it will not work with a while loop. Let's see why. First, let me highlight the repeat while code, copy it, then Command/ to comment it out, and then I'll paste a copy of the code below, and let's modify this back so that it's a while loop. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do is where I initialize roll count in here, I'm going to set it to 1, not 0. I'm going to cut out the while condition after the closing curly, and I'm going to paste that over repeat, so now it's at the start of the curlies. And notice the error that shows up. Variable dice roll is used before being initialized. So this is what we were talking about. When we declared the variable with var dice roll, we created this data holding box named dice roll, but we didn't put anything inside it. We didn't initialize it. So Xcode is actually telling us, hey, if you look inside this box and it's got nothing inside of it, that's an error. I'm not going to let you do it. Now, it's actually really wonderful that Xcode catches errors like this before you run your code. Many other programming languages and programming environments wouldn't do this. You'd have an error in your code when it was running, executing code would crash, and those errors might also be harder to find. Yet another reason why Xcode and Swift create a great environment for programming. So I'm going to fix this by copying the int random down here in between the curlies and pasting that in after an equal sign in dice roll. And I could delete the :int now since I'm implicitly declaring this. You might see some programmers who prefer to explicitly declare all of their variables so it's really clear what they are, but there's no harm in deleting that. Now there's a jump cut in here. One thing that I should have done is I should have copied this print statement, which I'm going to do now, and paste it in before the while condition. The code would run without this print statement, but we wouldn't be printing the first dice roll, which we want to do. So now you can stop and start, and you can see that the while loop code works great. And if you want, you can go up here and delete the explicit int declaration in var dice roll. There's no problem in doing that. And now you should have a great set of notes in this playground that you can refer back to should you ever need a while and repeat while refresher. So now it's time for our very last challenge. We want to apply what you learned about these loops in your app. So you should modify your You Are Awesome app so that neither the message nor the image ever repeat. And here's a hint. You'll need to keep track of the last message number and the last image number displayed, and so we can compare answers, why don't you call these last message number and last image number. So pause, give it a shot, I believe in you, I think you can do it, and resume, and let's compare answers. So we're going to work in the button action, and again, if you want to, you can write some pseudocode in English here just to give us an idea of what we're going to do. So that's what I'll do right now if it's helpful. So in comments, I'm going to write, step 1, generate a random message number to use as an index. If the message number equals the last message number, then I want to keep generating a new random message number until we get a message number that does not equal the last message number. If we finally have a message number that doesn't equal the last message number, then what I want to do is set message string to messages and in brackets message number. And remember, that triggers the text view to redraw with the new non-repeated message string. And then I want to update the last message number with message number so we make sure that our last message number is indeed the number of the last message that we showed. And so now I'm going to delete the old message string line below this that could potentially produce the repeated message, and I'm going to replace that with code that should work like the pseudocode that I wrote in the comments above. So to generate a random message number, we can declare that variable with var message number equals int.random, and we'll pass in the range 0, messages.count -1. And we could do this with a repeat loop, but let's start with a while loop. We'll say while message number equals last message number, open and close curlies. But look at the error we're getting in here. Cannot find last message number in scope. This is Xcode's way of saying you haven't created this thing called last message number. Oh yeah, we need to create this variable. In fact, we need to create it as a state variable because we want whatever we put in last message number to linger around even as we redraw our views and throw away any of the other non-state variables that are inside of them. So I'll copy last message number, mosey up top, create a new state variable for it with state private var last message number equals, and I could set this equal to 0, but I don't want to, because if I say my last message number is 0, and I'm going to check for that in my while loop, then the first time my app runs, I'd never show message 0. That's not a big error. I could still show message 0 on subsequent clicks of the button, but to allow any of the message numbers to be considered the first time we go through this, I'm going to put a number in here that would never be the last message number. I'm going to put in a -1. Also, since we're going to be generating our image number and our message number inside our button view, and we're already going to keep track of our last message number and last image number with the variables last message number and last image number, then we no longer need these to be state variables. So I'm going to highlight and delete them. And while I'm up here, I know I'm going to need a last image number too, so I'll create a state variable for that with state private var last image number equals -1. Now inside the while loop, if the message number equals the last message number, I want to generate a new random message number. So I can just copy this code that's right after the var keyword and paste it between the curlies. Now below the curlies, I'm 100% sure I've got a non-repeated message number, so I'm going to set message string equal to messages and in bracket message number. And finally, this last bit is easy to forget. We want to take last message number, that state variable that's going to linger around, and set it equal to message number, the new last message number that we displayed. So this code should work great for updating a non-random message. Now we're going to do just about the same thing for our image name. Now I don't need this line with image name anymore because that could potentially generate a non-random image name. So I'll comment this out, and then below this I'm going to declare var image number and set this equal to the same random value I had in my image name code that I commented out. That's int.random in 0.9, and that's because I've got 10 different images in my asset catalog named image 0 through image 9. Then my while loop says while image number equals last image number, and in between the curlies, I'll set image number equal to, and then paste in the same random number generating code that I used above. Then below the curlies, we use our new non-random image number to generate a new image name. So we'll say image name equals, and then this is going to be the string of the word image in lowercase, because each of our 10 images starts with the name image, and then string interp right after the E, no space, passing in image number. This is going to give us the name of a random image in our asset catalog. This is going to work great. Finally, we got to remember to update last image number, which is that state variable that's lingering around, and set it equal to image number, the new last image number. And now I can delete that old image name code that I commented out before. I don't need that anymore. And Swifter, you can click on your show message button. Until the Swifts fly home, you will never have a repeating message, nor will you have a repeating image. Nice work. Oh, right about now, I know what you might be saying. Hey, Prof G, can we turn this into a repeat while loop instead of a while loop? Of course you can. Cut out the while statement, replace it with the keyword repeat, paste the while statement in after the last curly, and for ultra efficiency, we can get rid of the initialization in var message number and just say :int. If we run this, it works perfectly. We can do the same thing with our while loop down below. I'll let you repeat the steps on your own. But Swifter, you are now a champion of the while loop and the repeat while loop, and you have non-repeating messages and images in your You Are Awesome app. Nice work! The big learning continues. We learned to use the while loop, the repeat while loop. We learned about infinite loops and how to stop them in the playground. We explicitly declared a variable without initializing it, and we saw the kinds of errors that might occur if we access a declared but not initialized variable. Swifter, the fact that you are constantly leveling up your code skills is on repeat while you keep at it, so continue to learn big. More knowledge drops are on the way.